Turkey Al-Sheikh has often put the cat amongst the pigeons in the world of boxing, but he has been talking about football and more specifically Manchester United, hinting at big investment in the club, leading people to feel that there could be a takeover afoot. We thought we would dig a bit deeper into that story with our man who keeps a close eye on that region, Ben Jacobs. Good afternoon, Ben.
Good afternoon, guys. How are you?
Good, thank you. I mean, obviously, Turkey, I think, an incredibly well-connected man in that part of the world. So you do sense there is some substance to this. What have you been hearing subsequently?
Yeah, you have to sit up and take notice when Turkey Al-Sheikh says things, but also go in knowing that those comments may need to be taken at times with a pinch of salt. Let's not forget he photoshopped a photo of Mo Salah in an Al Hilal shirt, and 2 weeks later he stayed at Liverpool. And crucially, as Al-Sheikh has now clarified, this potential investor is not from Saudi Arabia, nor is it from Qatar. And my understanding, as we revealed yesterday on talkSPORT, is the group in question are from the UAE. And although Al-Sheikh said that talks are advanced, and that may be the case internally, as the group potentially prepare a bid, there's been no approach yet to anyone at Manchester United, including the Glazers. So we'll have to wait and see whether this develops. What's interesting is there's a so-called drag-on clause, and what that means in layman's terms is now, and since August, if the Glazers get an offer that they like and they choose to sell, they have the ability to drag along, or more accurately, drag out Sir Jim Ratcliffe if the entity wants to buy 100% of the football club, which means that although Jim Ratcliffe is in control of the football side, at the same time, the Glazers could be independently seeking some kind of investment or even looking for a way out. So the UAE group is one to watch. They've approached some ex-Manchester United legends, but at this stage, they haven't actually made any form of bid.
What about the timing of this?
Yeah, sorry about that. It's odd that Jim Ratcliffe agreed to that without wanting first refusal. I mean, to buy it himself. Obviously, might have to raise a bit of money, or not. But I mean, it seems odd that he'd agree to this, where he could just be investing all his time and effort into it, and then suddenly the Glazers get a good offer, and that's all right. You walk away with a lot of money, but the whole project will have gone.
I think the more we learn about this deal, the more it's obvious that the Glazers negotiated it in a perfect way for themselves. And I'm in Portugal at the moment at a sports conference, and there's several investors here, and all of them independently that I've spoken to have said, this is why the Glazers got the best imaginable deal, because they have their cake and eat it. They are the majority owner at the football club. If they want to sell 100%, Ratcliffe has to go out with them or match the offer. And at the same time, until things go right, Ratcliffe has the limelight on him and will be the one that's scapegoated on the sporting side. And if things do go right, the Glazers can still take the credit.
I mean, what about the timing of this from the Glazers' point of view? Would this seemingly be a good time to sell? They still make an awful lot of money from Manchester United. Under Jim Ratcliffe, if his plans come off, the club will be worth even more money. So what about that, Ben?
I think it all depends on whether the projected value of a new stadium and the Old Trafford regeneration can be factored in, and someone's prepared to pay now a price that ultimately gambles on the fact that on the field, Manchester United will be restored to their glory, and off the field, the club will be modernised. And this is why the Glazers, knowing all that might happen, were asking in the original sale process for in excess of 5 billion. And I think that their valuation with that new stadium in mind will be closer to 8 billion if they're looking at what the club might be worth in the next 5 or 10 years. So this feels to me like a clause that is not urgent. It's activated in August, 18 months from the original sale. The Glazers can seek interest, but if they don't find it today or tomorrow, I think they'll sit back, they'll let Ratcliffe do all of the restoration and hard work, and then eventually somebody may come. But of course, in the meantime, there could be a possibility the clause expires, or that Ratcliffe preempts another buyer and says he wants a bigger slice of the pie.
Now, onto the football. And last time we heard from Ivan Toney, he was talking up just how good the Saudi League was and how it compared with the Premier League. But a couple of stories, a few whispers recently about a possible return in the January window to the Premier League. What have you been hearing about that?
I think Ivan Toney, as you say, is speaking very positively about his time in Saudi Arabia. But what's going to be really interesting in the next few months is, will Thomas Tuchel tell him definitively, by being in Saudi, you're further down the pecking order? And Toney's aspiration is to play in the World Cup. Plus the fact, the way the calendar falls, there's a Ramadan break, and that is in the months at the moment of February through to mid-March. And there's also a break before the festive period as well. So it wouldn't actually be a bad idea for players that want to stay sharp to do a half-season loan and then maybe even go back to Saudi Arabia. So I think there'll be interest in Ivan Toney. Al Ahly sources say they don't want to sell. There's a brand new sporting director there, and he doesn't want to let Ivan Toney go. And then as far as Premier League interest, I think we've heard links with Tottenham due to the Thomas Frank connection. I'm not aware of any Spurs approach at this stage. Some have even said Manchester United. And again, I think Manchester United are banking on Benjamin Sesko, and they've got also Mateus Cunha, who can play at 9. But if Josh Zirkzee left, you never know, another striker could come in at Old Trafford. But at the moment, it's all quiet as far as the Premier League return is concerned. And again, even if there is interest, Toney would have to agitate for the move with his World Cup chances in mind, because Al Ahly don't want to let him go.
And how would that affect the tax situation? Because we hear a lot about players having to stay for a certain period. If they just went on a loan but were still contracted to a Saudi club, would that be an issue or not?
If it was a loan back to the UK, even if he was contracted to a Saudi club, he'd spend too many days in the UK and there would be a tax problem. But there can be workarounds. So if the player wanted to loan and then go back to Saudi, they could do what Jordan Henderson did and ask to defer their wage. And then when they return to Saudi Arabia, get a bigger number thereafter. So it's one for the lawyers and the accountants, but it's not a given if it's a loan that there will be tax implications. But it's a lot harder if specifically that return for Toney is to the UK as opposed to somewhere else in Europe.
You get the sense, though, that Tuchel doesn't fancy him. I mean, he had him in that squad. He never even played, brought him for about 10 seconds.
It does.
You know, he had him around the training camp.
I think, you know, what happens in January? What happens in January will tell us a lot about the conversations they've had. Finally, a story from earlier today. Not particularly good news for Forest. Newcastle United, looks like they've poached Ross Wilson to be their new sporting director. I mean, is this a blow for... Good news for Newcastle, I guess, but is this a blow for Forest, Ben?
I think it's a blow for Forest in the sense that they obviously regard Ross Wilson very highly, but I don't think it's a surprise. My understanding is Nottingham Forest have known that Ross Wilson was likely to depart pretty much a week or two after Paul Mitchell left Newcastle United. And now we're in a situation where it's all done between Ross Wilson and Newcastle to become sporting director for the Magpies, but there's still some advanced talks about compensation and the exit package. But my expectation is this gets done in a matter of days and Ross Wilson goes over to St James's Park. And then the other point to note is who might replace him. And here's where it gets really complicated, because 6 weeks ago, to my first point about Forest knowing Wilson was likely to leave, I would have said Scott Munn, because Ange Postecoglou had said to Evangelos Marianakis that he wanted a reunion with Munn, having worked together at Tottenham. But now, because there's such a big question mark over Postecoglou, I'm not so sure that Munn replacing Ross Wilson will be a given, but that's one of the names to watch, because the expectation is that Ross Wilson will go to Newcastle United, and then we have to see what Forest do, because Edu is there. But remember, Edu Gasper's role is for the group, not just Nottingham Forest. So they will need to bring in another recruitment expert.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ben.
Cheers, guys.
Paul Hawksbee and Andy Jacobs, Monday to Friday afternoons, 1 till 4. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.